Do you need to check our mics?
Yeah, you want to check both?
Okay. Who do you want? Check.
Make sure you get pretty close. Yeah, you can move the mic.
1, 2, 3, 4, check. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, check. 1, 2.
That was a super long check.
Okay. All right. Play the intro, and I'll fade out, and you guys can start.
Yeah, just tell me when you want me to start.
Welcome to Blamestorming. Blamestorming. In a post-truth world, there's plenty of blame to go around. Plenty of blame to go around. Plenty of blame to go around. Join Dave Sirus and Maryssa Smith as they blamestorm about today's hot topics.
I think you're probably one.
I am, yeah. Yes, that's... Your mic good?
Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome to Blamestorming. I'm Maryssa Smith. I've got Dave Sirus with me.
Hello.
I've got Peter Brocker with me.
Hey, guys.
And I've got Gary Levitt with me.
That's me. Hello.
So, Dave, how have you been? Last time you were on, you were out in L.A.
I was in L.A. Yeah, I was doing stuff. I went to Temecula, which, according to everyone else I've met, I'm the only person to have a positive experience in Temecula.
What is Temecula?
It's just a town, like an hour and a half outside L.A. It's halfway between L.A. and San Diego, which is like 100 miles apart and takes 8 hours to drive. So I was there, like some party. It was fun. A lot of children at this party, which I haven't been to a lot of parties with children, and like, you guys look like adults. What's like the
Thanks.
What's like the protocol for doing drugs in front of kids? Now, I mean, like vapes, like vape pens that are mostly indistinguishable from like e-cigarettes. Is it wrong to get high literally in front of a child with those things?
When you say children, do you mean like actual children, or
Yes.
do you mean just young people?
Toddlers, you know,
Oh, okay.
from like baby to like 6.
Oh,
No, they were like baby to 10 years. Just whatever age you're worried about, assume that's included.
Is it wrong to drink in front of them?
No,
There is
it's
the answer.
not.
That's the answer.
Well,
Yeah, but I've also never had a beer and then accidentally blown my beer into a child's face and gotten that child high.
that's
yeah.
true. Well,
This is true.
well, I didn't do that either.
That's good.
And it's these are vapes, so it's not like the same thing you can get, the smoke in the face and actually get high off it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're still smoking drugs. It's like, but I mean, it's the same thing where like if I'm on a plane, and when I fly, obviously like all people, I do an enormous amount of edibles. So when I fly, I'm really high, and sometimes if I'm sitting next to a child, I actually do feel kind of bad. I feel like I'm doing something wrong just being this high next to a kid.
That's the bullshit stigma of drugs in this country. It's not like that in Europe. There's less of a stigma. For some reason, alcohol is completely accepted, but anything marijuana end up is worse. But the most messed up I've ever been in my life is on alcohol, by far.
That's fair.
The most dangerous drug, without a doubt.
And I've done some serious drugs. But yeah, I feel like I was in the least control drunk. But I mean, I've never done like the major drugs. Like I haven't done, your cracks or your heroines. I've done like, things like weed and like, mushrooms, stuff like that. This, the fun ones. Mm-hmm. The ones that you don't see a lot of documentaries about ruining your lives.
And you
over.
probably never blacked out on those.
I've never blacked out on anything. I've never blacked out on liquor either. Mm-hmm. I've never gotten drunk enough that I didn't remember what I did. Mm-hmm. I've only gotten drunk enough that I could get away with telling someone I didn't remember what I did.
Maybe it's just me then.
That's like the best case scenario of getting drunk.
Yeah.
That's like, oh, no, I know what I did, but you're not going to call me on it because you think I don't.
Right, exactly. But no, I've never forgotten anything. So I don't even know what it means to be that drunk that you literally black out.
I don't remember second semester sophomore year at college.
I thought you were straight edge.
No, that was in high school.
Oh.
In college, I drank a lot. But I guess I was trying to make up for it in high school. But I don't know. I guess my question would be like, would you have felt comfortable being drunk in front of these kids?
Well, comfortable being drunk in front of kids? Yes, of course, because you should be drunk in front of kids. They're children. You shouldn't have to accommodate them in any way.
Very Santa Claus of you.
Yeah. But I've never been drunk in front of children, I don't think. I've been high in front of a lot of kids. But, I maintain it pretty well.
Get a real sense of your lifestyle. I will say, I think that, like, if you had smoked before you went to the party, would you feel at all bad?
Oh, I didn't feel bad smoking in front of them either. I'm just asking a question. But yeah, no, I wouldn't have felt bad. I mean, almost every, like Thanksgiving, me and my brothers are getting high before we walk in the door. And there's always children there. I think and that's most people, right? Most people aren't going to Thanksgiving sober.
A lot of parents get high with their kids around, not with them, but like with them around.
Yeah.
Were the parents smoking?
At this thing in Temecula? No, this was just me. This was I was mostly the only one getting high. I mean, other people were a little bit, and there was like some drink, but it wasn't like they were sloppy drunk either. But it's more like other people at the party were like, I didn't take 2 days off of work just to have to accommodate a bunch of children. They're kind of like, if I'm taking work off, I'm flying out here, I should be able to get stupid drunk. I don't care about any kids.
Right.
It's a good way to relate to kids,
You get along better.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that, and I think below a certain age, they're not going to remember it anyway. So
Yeah.
And after you smoke, you won't remember it either, so it's great.
But it's like ever like the first time you smoked weed as a kid, or first time you smelled weed. I think a lot of us were like, "Oh, that's what this has been all my life." Because I feel like the first time you smoke weed,
Daddy's cologne.
Yeah, everyone's like remembering instantly how many other places you've smelled this in your childhood. You're like, "Oh, that smells like the art teacher's room." I remember like when someone told me that what crack smelled like, and being like, I definitely, there's like, oh, it smells like burning rubber. And I'm like, there was a room in camp that always smelled like burning rubber.
We went to very different camps.
I was in Brooklyn.
That's
my first, I remember in camp when another, like a 6-year-old pulled a switchblade on me and cut my water wings. I went to that kind of camp.
My introduction to mushrooms was at a Grateful Dead show, and I thought mushrooms smelled like patchouli for years.
Oh, that's funny. I only did acid once, and it was because my friends made me go to a 4th of July fish show, and once there I realized I never thought I would do acid, but I was like, I'm going to be here for like 8 hours, and I might kill myself if I don't do much harder drugs than weed. That was just the decision I ended up making.
You kind of have to at a Fish concert, I think.
Yeah, well, they all said, they're like, trust me, once you're there, you're going to love it. And I went there with an open mind, and then was within an hour was like, I need the hardest drugs I've ever done right now.
Not what any band really wants to hear, I don't think.
I think Fish knows who their audience is.
It helps.
So, yeah, so while we're on the subject, you guys, I've never met you guys before, but do you guys want to tell me every drug you've done?
You want to take?
You don't have to.
No, thanks.
I feel like, yeah, no, I did not expect a yes to that question.
The lead in with mushrooms followed by the no thanks leaves me with like, a lot of questions.
Right, that's the thing. You've already admitted to mushrooms, which means you've done much worse.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to offend you. You're a nice guy. We know each other.
You
a
don't
little
know
bit.
me yet.
I mean, we know each other a little bit, enough for me to say, yeah, you definitely look like you've done more than mushrooms. No offense.
No comments.
Yeah, and by that I mean you look cool.
Thank you. I'm happy to play the part.
Anyway, yeah.
I've never done mushrooms.
Oh, you should. It's good for you. I mean, don't do them a lot. Everyone I know who did a lot of mushrooms ended up being really weird.
Never done mushrooms. I've robo-buzzed a couple of times. But
Oh,
like
Robitussin?
Yeah.
On purpose, or did you just
No,
take too much?
No, that was on purpose.
Did you throw up?
No, I didn't.
Because I remember when I was a freshman in college, I was the only one on like the whole group of like my floor who didn't robo-trip, and they all threw up like on the walls everywhere. And then we had to like get like a thing because the cleaning ladies threatened to quit.
No.
And I was on their side. I was like, guys, we owe them an apology. We had one guy. There was one guy there who was a little bit of a Stephen Miller, who was saying like, I think they're just complaining too much. They're paid to pick up our stuff. And I'm like, no, shut up. Stop it. You're a really bad person. You know what? Now that I think of it, maybe it was Stephen Miller. We're like the same age. No, I don't think it was.
I didn't throw up, but I was like drinking water with it, so like I think that probably helped.
Did you like it?
Yeah, so like I did it twice, and the second time I did it is when I was like kind of like walking around, and I was like like the only one awake. Like all of my friends were like either at parties or something like that. I ended up by myself, and I went to college in New Hampshire, so like it was just lightly snowing, and I just decided to just take a walk, and the snow was like glistening from the lights on the side of the path, and it looked like just kind of like glistening pennies. And so I was just like, oh, like, you know, like I'm gonna follow like this like copper path to wherever it takes me, and then took me like all the way across campus, and then it was this one dorm room that had like one light open, like on or whatever. And so like I went to that room, just happened to be one of my friends' rooms, and they're just like, what's up? And I'm like, oh, like I'm robo-buzzing. And they're just like, oh, hang out. It's snowing, like blah, 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 chill. And so she had this kind of like Alice in Wonderland poster, like, you know, the one with like the caterpillars smoking.
Yes.
And so it has like the maze and stuff like that. So like literally for an hour, I just stood in front of this poster, and I like traced every possible way that this maze could possibly go, and like every kind of path went back into that pipe. And so then like after I turned, she's like, I'm done. And then she's like, you're done with what? And I'm like, drugs just lead to drugs. There's no other path. I'm done. And I like literally never did anything else after that, because it was just like that was my whole epiphany. I don't know.
That might be the most positive experience I've ever heard from somebody robo-tripping.
That was like it.
That's so funny. I was about to say that is the single worst trip I've ever heard.
That's what I was
That is
thinking.
the worst case scenario of getting really high that it convinced you to never get high again.
Steve Jobs
Yeah.
did a lot of acid, and it worked out all right for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It works different on everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the last time I did mushrooms, I
Yesterday.
went to see Harry Potter alone. No, it's been a long time. I went to see the last Harry Potter movie in a theater alone because no one else wanted to go to the theater, and I was like, I'm going to do this. So I went to Mann's Chinese Theater, you know, the one with the handprints in Hollywood.
Yeah.
I rode my bike there, you know, responsible. And I watched it pretty high. And the thing is, that movie opens with with a lot of little people. You know, they play the dwarves in the bank. And I realized that, like, I wasn't, like, freaked out by the Harry Potter and the dragons and stuff. I was freaked out, like, by the realization that these are all just dwarves in makeup. That was my main problem. But the weird thing was, it was coming home after the movie ended, and I was still really high. And I got in this weird mood because it's a pretty bad neighborhood at some points. Like, there's a lot, just not bad, but like there's a lot of like people like asking for change and heroin addicts and stuff.
It's like the Times Square of LA.
Yeah, it's exactly like Times Square. And I'm kind of looking around. And I was on the phone with people, and I was just like, I gotta be honest, I really want to get into a fight right now. And I never wanted to get in a fight in my life. I'm not a violent person. I don't get in fights. But I was like walking around, like, I gotta say, I'm feeling a really right mood for this.
You're the only person that smokes pot and wants to fight.
Well, that was
It
mushrooms.
was mushrooms, yeah.
Oh.
And I didn't want to fight. I just felt like I felt more ready for it than ever. And a guy I knew in college beat up 3 cops on mushrooms. So that sort of makes me believe that it really does give you powers.
Yeah. It can. You're very
Powers
susceptible
to go to jail.
You're very susceptible to energy. So
Well, not if you win.
If you get some negative energy in there, you never know what could happen.
It was very it felt very positive. I was not going to fight anyone on purpose. I was just having the moment where I was like, you know, if it's ever going to happen, I will fucking kill somebody right now. And the worst part was I'm walking past people and I'm making like eye contact them, and I'm like, as far as you are from me right now, and I'm looking, just walking about on my phone being like, I would fuck this guy up.
You should be careful because you're not a big guy.
I gotta be honest, I think I would have won. I really believe in myself on this.
Hey, power of a positive attitude, you know?
Yeah.
So, Peter, how have you been?
I've been good. I haven't been to Temecula by choice. But you know, it sounded great. You know, next time I want to get high around kids, I'll go out there. But no, I did go out west. I was just in San Francisco, and I went like in the 1 month window when it wasn't on fire.
Oh, that's
Oh,
nice.
wow.
It's burning again, right? That was in the
Yeah.
news today.
Yeah.
There's
Oh, it's burning. Oh, yeah.
the whole area.
You know, it's funny. San Francisco just came up because somebody was Tucker Carlson was talking about the homeless people there, and he was calling them zombie mobs. And someone was trying to use this as like an example. They were attacking liberals with this, and I was like, I don't see how calling them zombies is defending them. It was like the idea they were trying to say, like, oh, well, Tucker cares about the homeless. I'm like, no, he doesn't.
Yeah.
He's just calling them mobs of zombies.
It doesn't sound flattering. The homeless situation in San Francisco is definitely out of control.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It is an amazing influx of. I mean, they are the most brazen homeless I've ever seen.
I lived there for 4 years, and when I went back to my old apartment on Folsom Street in the Mission, and it's just lined with people in tents. And meanwhile, the people in houses and apartments are paying exorbitant rents. And you come out of your apartment, and there's just people just hanging out and living in tents.
Yeah, my sister used to live in the Mission, and I would like visit her, and then you would go downstairs at night, and the second you walk outside, there would be like just, obviously like drug dealers and prostitutes and pimps just walking around.
And there's so much money in that city. There's such a disparity.
You don't see that in a lot of cities where like the street crime is in such a high rent area.
They need to push it all in one area like every other city.
Well, I used to work for the LA Homeless Coalition, and we would.
That's a great example in LA. Downtown LA is like
Burning
Man zombie wasteland.
Yeah, we have a shanty town. We have a literally called Skid Row.
Yeah.
Where funny story by the way about Skid Row. Buddy I know, this guy was at a UFC fight. This older man, he was talking about how his life is great now, but in the '80s he was a crackhead, and he was like, I got a funny crackhead story because I hang out at the Smell, which is right by Los Angeles Street in LA. It's a great like punk venue, but you have to walk past the shanty town to park your car. And he was like, yes, I was there, and some shirtless blonde guy walks up to me and asks where the heroin is. And I was like, oh, heroin's down, that way. And my buddy goes, he starts walking away, and my buddy goes, oh, there's no way he was going to make it all the way to 7th Street. And the guy said to me, he goes, well, he definitely made it, because I'm telling you right now, that was definitely Iggy Pop. Walking shirtless through Los Angeles Street, scoring heroin.
Man, you think you'd at least have a delivery person by now.
Yeah. Well, it's the 80s. I'm going to go ahead and say he's still walking streets looking for heroin. No offense, Iggy. Respect your music.
So, Gary, how have you been?
I've been good. I recently got passed at LOL Comedy Club, which is a comedy club in Times Square, New York.
Congrats.
Thanks. It's been quite an experience. It's pretty much like touring mainstream America without leaving.
Yeah.
Because it's mostly tourists.
Yeah.
It's mostly tourists, but it's a particular kind of tourist. It's the kind of tourist that books a flight, arranges a place to stay, and comes to New York and then has no plans. And they're just wandering around Times Square buying comedy tickets off a homeless person that's telling them Tina Fey's going to be there tonight and Chris Rock.
Oh, I've literally been in Times Square on a Saturday night and had someone say, hey, do you want to come to our comedy show? Jay Farrow and Pete Davidson are on it. And I'm like, they're both on SNL tonight.
And they don't do stand-up.
Well, they do.
Oh, they do.
do
Okay.
stand-up.
Tina Fey doesn't.
Right. But yeah, you're right. They will literally just say anyone.
Anybody. Yeah.
Like they will tell you Richard Pryor is headlining tonight with Bill
I've
Hicks.
had people yell at me at Broadway because they were like, well, someone told me Richard Pryor is going to be here tonight. And I'm just like, unless we do a seance, I don't think so. And they're just like, what are you talking about? I'm like, he's been dead for years. And they're like, well, I want my money back. I'm like,
I mean, they should get their money back. It's blatantly lying. That is a crime. It is bait and switch if you're literally telling people that someone's not going to be there. It's just something that we all know.
They're dead.
I was gonna say, if you don't know that the person you're going to see and excited about seeing died 10 years ago or 20 years ago,
It's
that's
on you.
That's really on
your
you.
fault.
It's still a crime, but you know what? Sometimes it can be a crime and still be entirely your fault.
But then you could be like, you just found out he's dead and you care about your tickets?
Yeah, you should be
Yeah,
mourning.
that's a great response to that.
You should be upset.
Yeah.
Heartless.
Go mourn him in the back row over there.
So a lot going on in the news today.
Every day.
I know.
Yeah, we can get started on on the exciting stories of the day if you'd like. We do have a lawyer. We're supposed to have two, right?
Right.
Now you are a lawyer.
I am.
What kind of law do you practice?
So
What did you?
No, so I still am. I still until comedy starts paying my bills, I just ride it out, the struggle. But I'm in civil litigation, so just lawsuits and
Well, that's fun.
that's it. It's hell on earth, but it's really
But the litigation must be fun. That means you actually get some court time. You actually get some.
So I think I do what everybody expects lawyers to do,
Right.
which
you
is
actually.
which is not what most lawyers do. Honestly, litigation is increasingly not what lawyers do. Like it's all corporate, I mean, every time you turn on the news and like there's an $80 billion buyout, you got to figure. Oh,
It's kind of similar to stand-up comedy. You're basically selling your story.
yeah, it's all. I mean, it's all a show, and it's a show. In like every time that you talk to anybody, you know, it's like if you're the one thing that litigation has is like a very clear adversary. So like I'm always gonna have an enemy in any case.
Like the audience.
Exactly. So like, and
That is what comedy is. It is us versus them.
yeah, and especially when they think they bought tickets to Pryor, and
Yeah.
that's a real us versus them moment. But yeah, so it's all a show. You know, you always have to be on. You never want to let anybody see behind the curtain and realize that you don't know what the hell you're doing at all. But
Yeah. Now, one story we wanted to get into. It's not really the biggest story right now, but Mexico, of course, has a new president, and Obrador, I believe
Right.
is how you say his name. I've only read it. I haven't heard it, so feel free to tell me on Twitter how stupid I am. But yeah, Mexico has elected a fairly left-wing populist president. And I guess the question is, would this have happened if not for Trump kind of forcing Mexico's hand of having to respond to him trying to basically hardball Mexico as just because he felt that they were a valid scapegoat for his own problems?
I think so. I think it would have, because I think globally, most countries are becoming very populist, and he's kind of like, from what I've read, he's like the leftist version of Donald Trump. Like if Donald Trump was Mexican, so he's like very,
Which
like,
I'm sure is in several ways insulting to Obrador, because it's one of those things where you take one thing about Trump and say, well, this makes you like Trump, and it's like, well, there's a lot of other things that Trump's known for that are much worse than this, than just being, nice to crowds.
yeah,
He
but-
grabs women by the heart.
Yeah, tickles their soul. But he's been in Mexican politics for a while, and I guess he's never really, like, he's been around, but he's never really picked up that much popularity. But I think that he was campaigning on the same thing, as that, like, destroy the system, like. I guess maybe he's like if Trump and Bernie like had a child.
Well, I mean, really, he's much closer to just Bernie because he is a populist. He wants to be anti-corruption, and he wants to lower the salaries of the richest people and create less of a wage gap. I mean, it's everything he's saying is fairly normal politically. It's the way that he campaigns, and that it just seems like this is a natural reaction to when you have a right-wing bully, that you're going to get more people extreme to the other direction. And it's sort of what I expected to happen when Trump started doing this whole routine of trying to just sort of use almost mob boss mentality and bully everyone out. You're going to get people pushing back really hard.
The other
And-
way,
yeah, but I think you'd almost expect them to go right wing in their own country, though. Like, I think this reaction to the left is not normal for an anti-Trump Mexican politician. And I think if you really look at his rise, I think you have to look at the increase in violence that's really swept through Mexico in the last year. Just this election cycle, dozens of candidates were targeted, and I think it was somebody will write to the podcast and have the actual figure, I feel like, but I want to say close to a dozen candidates were killed, including some of the most liberal.
Yeah.
So this push to the left, I mean, Mexico's been fairly conservative, fairly right-wing for decades, largely at the U.S.'s influence, and like we've really pushed them to stay to the right in terms of their policies, and really drove our own border to the Mexico southern border under Obama. So I think that, if anything, the vacuum from Trump sort of almost pulling out of Mexico and saying, we're just going to police our own border, and that's our line in the sand now, has left a vacuum that like the liberals in Mexico could finally capitalize on.
And you would think the increase in crime would help the right wing of Mexico.
Well, I mean, if you look at the institutions that are fueling the crime, whether it's like the military or the police, I mean, those are the traditional right-wing institutions.
organizations. Yeah.
So,
Well, it seems as though, I mean, Mexico does have a much bigger problem with corruption than America does. At least if you look at what's come out. I mean, you don't have a lot of stories about, the American government colluding with high-level drug dealers to murder students. I mean, there's a very serious problem in Mexico in terms of the amount of power that cartels have in government that just simply doesn't exist here.
Well, there was I can't remember what province in Mexico, but there like this governor.
I'm gonna guess Nogales because everything's Nogales, but go on.
But like he's one of the Duartes because they have a few governors that are Duartes. But like allegedly, like he was in cahoots with like I guess Mexican big pharma to give like these kids that I think they had like cancer or something like that. But basically, he was like charging them like exorbitant amount of money or their parents exorbitant amounts of money to get medication for their cancer and just selling them all placebo. And so like and it ended up being like maybe hundreds of millions of dollars that they made like giving these sick kids just like placebo and thinking that they were buying real drugs.
Well, that makes me happy because at least that's something that I know that America's also done. Because that at least I feel better about that. Because I was saying all these things about Mexico, and it's like, oh no, we've totally done that to people too.
Yeah, but in America, at least we try to keep it to like the Cialis customers.
Right. But I'm trying to remember the name of the drug, but there's a very famous example of where basically a lot of people stopped taking antipsychotics just because they were like, you know what, let's just see if this one works. It was like some drug that had nothing to do with it. I wish I had the names off the top of my head. But there was a lot of cases of that where they would just start pushing drugs and say, we think this drug might work for this. And then people just stop taking the drugs that keep them sane. So, you know, that's almost like the quaint kind of corruption. That's like the acceptable corruption that we all sort of say is okay, that we accept as part of like business as usual. And then it's the things like the, you know, murdered buses of children that really get things going, which just sucks because, you know, that should also be a story.
The alarming thing is that the governments are going extreme either way. Whether you're a righty or a lefty, it's alarming because moderates are just kind of more, makes me feel a little better.
It is a very, very dangerous precedent that moderates don't exist on either side, and that Trump's influence is making it so that only extreme leftists can win also, because it creates, I mean, isn't that a completely untenable way to run any kind of government?
And what's the pendulum answer to that? More extreme right.
Well, the pendulum answer to that is democratic socialists, who are, I think, far preferable to Trump Republicans, but it's still going to create a problem of less is going to be able to get done because you have less daylight. You have more daylight between the two parties, and there's less they can even compromise on. So I think we are probably permanently screwed.
I think we might be permanently screwed until we get something straightened out with Fox News and misinformation in general, because we can't even agree on facts anymore.
Well, that's true. Is that like when there's no center, because like at least we had a rudder with the truth, and like no matter what party you were on, like you could say like, all right, well this is the truth. Like we now know there were no weapons of mass destruction. We fucked up, and we could get behind, okay, we fucked up, let's not let this happen again. But now it's just like, well,
it's funny you use that example, because that is the example, I think, of what catalyzed this break from reality. The weapons of mass destruction argument was something that no Republican, at the end of the day, could argue with. I mean, for years they did. For years, I mean, there were people saying we did find them because they just tried to kick the can and lie about that. But what really happened was, I truly believe that the reason that we have this degradation of the political system is resentment over how wrong they were about Bush. That the people who supported Bush in the Iraq War were so deeply resentful of the idea that they made such a bad decision that they emotionally needed for Barack Obama to be a failed presidency. And they created a false reality where he was.
But the scary thing is that Trumpers don't like Bush either. They don't like systems.
Well, they don't like America. They like Trump.
They don't like the government. They don't like Trump.
That's why they don't mind when Trump makes personal money off of his job as president, because they're on his side, not America's side.
I've never seen such demagoguery before. They just like a person, not a system or a strategy. They just
it's cartoonish cultism.
It's definitely very scary.
All right. So not to pull us back from the brink of Armageddon conversation here. I actually think that it's a little bit less severe than it sounds right now. Don't get me wrong. I think it's gonna get a lot worse in the near future. I was reading today that this could be the first election where you have like the deep fake videos, where you have actually President Obama saying things that he never said in video form.
Right.
They
Or you
already
just-
do that. They edit it together, and people think it's true.
Well,
But
that
no,
was
that's-
that was just the Jordan Peele's example, but we have not seen a literal fake quote from a president that was done for that purpose, and we will.
But yeah, so like just using pure like AI and video editing techniques, they can now create videos where it looks and sounds like Obama is telling you something that he never said and doesn't support.
Right.
And so that could easily this could be this election's Facebook.
Right.
And but I do think overall, I think what you've seen is people lose faith in their ability to affect the institutions. So the people who really care are the people that are the most extremes at the most extreme points of view, because they're the ones who are willing to fight and have their voice heard. If you're actually a moderate, which I do think there are a lot of moderates left in the world,
Maybe they're just not very vocal.
you've lost faith in the idea that your vote counts. And honestly, if you're a liberal moderate, your vote actually does count less than a conservative moderate.
By a lot, yeah. Well,
I
we
think-
have a very serious gerrymandering problem, and that's separate from the electoral college problem, where someone in Wyoming has 3 times as many votes as someone in New York, which is a broken system. We're very close right now to getting more votes for Democrats in the House and still having less seats, and that would create a precedent where consistently one party gets more votes and the other party retains power, which is the kind of thing that without a violent revolution, I don't know how that changes.
Well, so I mean, the way it changes is that the Supreme Court steps in, which it just punted down the road on that case.
Yeah, they're not going
the
to.
Wisconsin case.
Yeah.
But I think that they might, and I think that the reason I say they might is because, essentially, kind of looking at it long term, the Supreme Court doesn't want to get out in front of any issues. Like they did it with Roe v. Wade, and they've essentially got chastised into never doing that again. So they're just going to wait until it's at a crisis point, and you're starting to see things like reactionaries on the left getting violent again, like Weather Underground style tactics from the was it the 70s?
Yeah.
At that point, when they say, "Oh, well, all of this is actually traceable to gerrymandering," and the 2020 census has this like exponential increase in Republicans across the board because their software was better and they controlled like 60% of the state houses across the country, then you might see the court weigh in and say, "Okay, this is too far." They've already said it's unconstitutional, partisan gerrymandering. They just have never ruled anything unconstitutional because, according to them, the dumb federal district court judges, who are only Harvard and Yale educated and appointed by the president, couldn't possibly fathom the standards that the Supreme Court had handed down, which I think is always funny when they say that.
Now, just to make sure everyone understands, what you basically just said was, if you want things to get better, you got to start committing terrorism.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want anybody to.
Now, I
to
don't know if you know
gloss
the
over what I
weather.
said.
I don't know how much people know the Weather Underground, but they didn't kill people. They blew up things, which, by the way, we should respect.
But occasionally those things had a person or two in them.
Well. To be fair, the only people who actually died due to the Weather Underground were people by accident who were, thank God, members of the Weather Underground.
yeah.
So let's give them the respect. Hey, if you blow yourself up trying to make a bomb, that's your business. It's just like I'm not gonna treat somebody who shoots a rival gang member the same as someone who shoots like.
But didn't the police department blow up an entire block trying to get the Weather Underground?
They blew up a house. Calm down.
Well, it was a little more than that. It was a little more than that.
Well, I think you're referring. I assumed you were referring to Move, which of course is different than Weather Underground. That was more of a Black Panther offshoot. The Mumia, where Mumia Abu Jamal lived, and the Philadelphia police blew up their house.
Yeah.
When they dropped that bomb.
Yeah, they bombed. Yeah, they bombed.
When, the time the police just flew in a bomb.
Bombed a whole city block.
And by the way, before drones, let's show a little respect to the Philly police. They did it back before you could just pick up a remote control and do it. So.
And they did it while eating a hot dog.
I mean, have you been to Philly? I feel like once you've spent more than a day and a half there, you agree that the normal rules of law and order don't apply.
Philly was very strange. Like, very, very strange. It just,
Well, I mean...
So what you're saying is that Philly deserved to get bombed?
What I'm saying is that it should have been fair and they should have bombed all the houses, yes. Just bombing the ones of Move was wrong, not the activists. Now, of course, you said you didn't enjoy Philly, Marissa, and our audience probably doesn't know. Marissa is black. If that explains why Philly didn't go great for you.
You went 2 weeks, Dave. I was so proud of you.
No, I said it last week.
No, you didn't.
I'm almost 100% sure I said it. I try not to let an episode go by without it. But that's the thing about Philly. Like, Philly and Boston are basically there to show us that, the South are not the only racist places in America.
Well, that's just northern New York. Like, I went to Lake George, not last summer, but the summer before, and I have never been so uncomfortable. And, like, I was more comfortable in Alabama than I was in, like, Lake George. Like, first off, every single house, like, Confederate flags. And it's just like...
In the state of New York.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
like, do you realize you're in New York? Like, this is not, like...
You're literally Yankees.
You are Yankees. And it's just, like, Confederate flags everywhere. It was, like, Hillary posters everywhere. It was Trump shit everywhere. Like, I had people, like... I was with my ex-boyfriend at the time. We took one of these scenic cruises. And this guy was like, he looked like a neo-Nazi. He was like goose-stepping in front of us to the point where his wife was just like, leave them alone. They're just trying to enjoy the sights. He's like, what? I'm not doing anything. And just like goose-stepping and literally like turning on his heel to like go back the other direction. And I'm like, and it was like part of the reason I was like, if anything ever happens, like, he's never going to be able to protect me. I'm like literally going to be the one that's going to have to go south.
It's actually the saddest thing about that is that I bet this guy would never have done that if it was a black guy and a white girl. Only white guy, black girl does he have the balls to start doing that shit.
I think that if it was like a more intimidating white guy, he probably wouldn't have.
I mean, I think there is like, I mean, talk about being sore winners of the Civil War. I guess upstate New York does get very Confederate flag heavy once you get north of like Poughkeepsie.
I think anywhere you go that is away from a city,
yeah,
you
it
start
gets
to
real.
see more Republican sort of conservatism.
But I also think that's not even conservative.
No, it's like
that's
white
just,
nationalism.
Yeah, that's just pure. Like I think that there is this weird blending that's happened on the left where, like we've started using terms that gloss over what's really happening. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, that's just racism. Like he's not goose stepping because he was like, oh, I'm really proud of like the 1932 to 1938 Nazi Party in Germany.
It's just
like,
human nature, fear of the unfamiliar. They don't come into contact with people of different races, so they're scared of them.
But it's like he's saying the reason that this guy is goose-stepping is not because he knows anything about Germany and Nazi Party. It's because if you're an asshole and you want to hurt people and you just hate people who don't look like you, you embody the Nazi Party, which is where Trump's coalition comes from, that they're all embracing this idea of I just hate the world and I just want someone to punish it.
Well, I also think the guy that was goose-stepping probably thought he was the victim. Like, there's no way that guy's out there in his own narrative. He's like, no, I'm just the racist piece of shit in this moment. He's out there and he's like, oh, I'm having a tough experience in my life, and I'm going to just act out like I'm a 6-year-old who pushed over a kid on the playground. And the way he does it is through racism and just invoking the most violent images he can turn up, which are like the Confederate flag, goose-stepping, Nazi propaganda. And, like, that's really coming out across the board now. And I think that there has to be a link between that and like the rise in suicide and substance abuse deaths among white America.
Well, I think that the substance abuse does directly relate to racism, honestly, because I think that we have a sort of tipping point where maybe almost half of Americans have diminished capacity, and I think all people who are not thinking clearly start to slide into conspiracy theories and the dumber ideologies like neo-Nazism or just general trust in everything Trump says. I'm not even trying to like make it like you're a Nazi if you like Trump, but look, there's something going on here where he's taking advantage of them.
I'll say you're a Nazi if you like Trump. But they just finished doing a study that actually said that there was like a higher rate of drug abuse in Trump voters than there were in Hillary voters.
I mean, I think that's common sense.
Yeah, which, I mean, kind of goes to your point. And this goes back to my point of instead of IDs at voting facilities, we need to start drug testing these people.
I disagree with that.
You can disagree with that. This is my own soapbox. But my feeling is if you can't legally drive a car, you shouldn't be legally voting.
I mean, well,
that'll hurt
because you're high, like currently.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say because like,
I think if you try to go and vote and you're under the influence, I don't think you should be able to vote.
Well, under the influence of what? Because
And
the
at
biggest
that
problem is
moment-
opiates, which half these people are on legally.
But would they be able to legally drive a car?
Sure.
On opiates? Yeah.
They have a
The people
prescription.
on
If they were-
prescription opiates can drive cars. Yeah.
If you're under the
That's not entirely true.
Maybe
I
you
mean,
shouldn't.
No, if you're under the influence, then you can't.
Well, if you-
There are some people who take what they refer to, maybe it's a small dose, something that's in the system. But if you're, and that it comes back to that's why you get field sobriety tests, because if you're falling over in the street because you're
Right. The term under the influence would mean under enough of it that it is
it's
affecting you.
illegal.
But
It's
that's-
impairing your ability to drive.
That's not how
Right.
drug tests work, though. They don't test for you with drugs in your system in the past hour or two.
They're just testing. Can you touch your finger to your nose and how much of a capacity you have at the time? I mean, look, I think that I don't want to take anyone's voting rights away for doing drugs, but yeah, we do have an issue where it does seem like
well, they take
Well,
them away if you're black
think it's
and
a-
live in the wrong area.
think it's a bigger
like
problem.
if you
Well,
don't have a birth certificate, there are nuns that can't vote because they don't have birth certificates. So I'm perfectly fine with a bunch of drug addicts not being able to vote.
I mean, I think undiagnosed schizophrenia is an overall bigger problem for voting, but I can't really take those people's votes away either.
What do you
Well, I
think would
think-
happen if the 50% of Americans that didn't vote in 2016 actually turned out in 2020?
Well, I think
think
that's
that-
the biggest question, right? Is that
Who
I think
are they and what do they want?
What's the thing? I
I mean,
think that
that's all the drug addicts.
everyone, you couldn't turn up because you were
Some of
so
them.
high. No, I think especially if you're on the left, the biggest thing you want is more voting, not less. Like
Right.
across the board, like it's the left's votes that are getting constricted, and
That's why you cut down on the drug addicts, because then you start cutting it to the right's votes.
or we could just expand it for everybody and just let the numbers play out as they go. And I think the easiest way to do that would be make Election Day a national holiday, which is ridiculous that it's not.
The very idea you have to take off work to vote is such a
Yeah, but you don't have to take off work for Labor Day, a holiday that nobody understands.
Right. And make
But
it more than one day. You
Yeah.
don't make voting
early voting.
Why
Voting-
can't it just? I mean, we don't even have to have a new day off. Just make it one of the holidays we already have.
Well, that would require a constitutional amendment.
Well, sure, but
And
I
so
mean,
that would
in the
be
long
tough
run,
right
it
now.
would still help.
That would be tough right now.
But yeah, the idea that you have that people who can't take off work can't vote kind of seems like it's designed to keep poor people from voting.
Exactly. And the
Maybe-
fact that felons are disenfranchised after they get out of prison, after their debt to society is paid, is a direct attack at poor people at this point. Because, I mean, look who goes to jail.
Maybe that's a worthy social movement. Get all the companies, corporations to give all the workers that day off. Maybe we don't need a constitutional amendment. Maybe
Well, I
just-
mean, I think that.
I don't trust them to do that. I'd rather have it be a law.
Well, isn't that the saddest thing, though, that your
Definitely.
first thought was corporations doing this rather than that Congress could get their shit together and do it at all?
I mean,
Yeah.
internally?
Starbucks did it over a bathroom,
Well, Starbucks did it
some-
over a really bad PR day. Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
And it's not clear that people liked that. Like, they got a lot of heat for
no,
that
I couldn't
one.
get
Like,
Starbucks that day. I was pissed.
for like that 3-hour window. You were like, I need my cappuccino. Like, race relations can wait.
But you keep kind of going back to like the Constitution, the Supreme Court, and Trump might be, or probably is, going to be nominating another justice. And what is, I mean, granted, Roe v. Wade is obviously the big bullseye, but like, what other things can we look?
Trump is going to base this on one thing. Did that judge say anything about the rights to indict a president? That's what he's picking a Supreme Court justice on. It's really goddamn scary. And I don't even know if someone's making sure that he's not having private conversations with these judges, because that right off the bat is such an invitation to obstruct justice.
Right. He
So
already has
he,
been
he has
interviewing.
been.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's been
he said he's been.
interviewing
We know he's been interviewing them. Have those been private interviews?
So usually, I'm not sure how it would usually be done. I know it's very normal for presidents to interview judges. I think usually,
Normal doesn't matter anymore. There has to be
Yeah.
laws, because people are always like, "Oh my God, it's not normal what he's doing."
Yeah,
And
the
then you
president's
find,
not usually a criminal.
right, but then you find out, well, there's no law against it. Like the whole not showing his tax returns. There should be a law that a president has to show his tax returns.
but that's across the board. Like, I mean, I think that in any country where the default is it not being illegal, because I mean, so there's not to go too far afield from what we're talking about. In the U.S., like there's a default. It's not illegal if it's not caught in a code saying it's illegal to do X.
But we can no longer say
The-
it's not normal for Trump to do that.
No, but I
'Cause
think that
that's what people like about him, that he's breaking the norms.
Sure, but like I mean, it goes beyond politics, right? Because like Martin Shkreli, like pharma
Trump Jr.?
Yeah.
Well, when he was prosecuted, he wasn't prosecuted for raising the price of all that drug that he bought. He was prosecuted for insider trading, because jacking up the price of drugs is not illegal.
Right.
And so it does go across the board. Like society and finance loves to claim, oh, we'll self-regulate and we'll have norms and the customers are our check. And it's the exact same argument that politics always had, that voters are our check and that we have norms. And so I think that's identical arguments, and so that's the reason I go into that one. But
And that's why populism is so dangerous. When you go pure populism will lead to just mobs.
well, I think that traditionally the Supreme Court was supposed to be, and the courts in general were supposed to be checks on populism.
Yeah.
The Senate was too, but only until the 20s when they started getting elected directly rather than appointed by the governors. Or however that used to work. I think it was you were appointed by the governor. But
What law school did you go to?
it was an online school. I'm also a minister.
Phoenix.
He went to Columbia with two O's.
yeah. Going to the knockoff Columbia. No, so in terms of Trump picking the next justice, I think that Roe v. Wade is already pretty much bad law. Like the protections in Roe v. Wade were really whittled down, and so like if you want to play that forward, like the real case that is defining abortion rights now is actually Planned Parenthood v. Casey, and that's I don't know if it's kind of further down. It doesn't make the headlines that often, but the undue burden standard really only exists in abortion law, and it's Justice O'Connor's old brainchild that has been applied so inconsistently because nobody knows what it means. It doesn't have a definition, and courts have really interpreted it however they want. And it's an undue burden on the right to access abortion is the test. And I think that what could happen is he doesn't have to appoint somebody that's come out and said, oh, like abortions should be illegal, because I don't think that they could do that at this point. I think that would just be such a fissure in society.
That's why there's so much interest in law right now, because these norms and whatever, no one even knows what's going on anymore. So we have to figure out what are the actual laws.
It's also fair to say, just from a political standpoint, that the Republican Party does not actually want abortion illegal because they will lose all their donations. If they lose abortion as a political football, they lose a giant part of why people vote Republican to make abortion illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, I think that's true. I think part of it is understandable, right? If you think abortion is truly murder of a child, you should care a lot about it. Like I think it was Louis C.K. who did a bit about that exact topic, where it was like, yeah, I'd probably be pretty upset about that if that's what I believed. But the question is that like because the standard is so ill-defined, and there's only like a few cases on it from the Supreme Court ever. There was one actually recently, only a couple of years ago, that was actually a pretty strict. It was in it. If you read it, it sounds very strict, but the actual ruling was not. So it was Justice Breyer, who's a liberal member of the court, writing it. So even in that moment, it just wasn't in practice that hard to put hurdles between women and abortion.
So now, what is like if you could just kind of brass tacks, what is an undue burden? Is it
That's the problem.
that
Well, that's the $1 million question,
right? So like, is it that you have to drive 100 miles to get there? Is it that you had to wait 3 days to get it? Is it that you have to, talk to your husband or your lover or your parents in order?
So that
like,
was so that was actually what was struck down not that long ago. Was there was in Planned Parenthood v. Casey was a spousal notification requirement, and they held that was unconstitutional. Fast forward, and you get the Texas laws. I think it was I forget the name of the case now. Where every abortion provider has to have essentially outpatient hallways where it's like 16 feet wide or whatever that.
Right, to bankrupt them, basically.
Essentially, yeah, they'd have to do massive overhauls. And the Supreme Court struck that down in part, but it did a somewhat good job doing it. It really looked into the details of it and essentially said, well, you're 28 times more likely to die in liposuction or something along those lines than abortion. So what is the real benefit here?
Now, didn't Ruth Bader Ginsburg oppose Roe v. Wade for the specific reason that it didn't go far enough? I read something about that she disagreed in the idea that she said if we had not made this decision, things could have gone further, where we did get a definitive answer onto abortion, and that it could have and that states could have one by one done it the same way, sort of that gay rights happened, where it would have been much more of a less divisive issue, whereas the way that Roe v. Wade came about gave these anti-abortion people a real galvanizing moment, and they've been using that ever since to try to get people to say, if you care about nothing but abortion, vote for the Republican Party. Yeah. And if you don't care about anything else that we do, this is the one issue, like guns, where you will vote against your best interest for this one issue.
Right.
Democrats don't have single issue votes so much.
Well, I think that increasingly abortion, but and just in general women's rights. I think that you don't have to look too far back to see just like kind of blatant sexism, and by too far back I mean like today. But I do think. Sorry, just to go back to what you were saying a second ago about Ginsburg. Obviously, she was on the Supreme Court back then.
I just mean that I've heard her say that it was a mistake.
I think that I think a lot of people have come out and said it was a mistake because it was a very divisive holding. But you kind of have to put yourself back in the mindset of the judges making it, and you were coming off the heels of really only 20 years of progressive courts, and we're talking about landslide changes from. Used to have I can't come up with the word right now, where you could not have interracial marriages. And
right.
That
misogyny.
Thank you.
That wasn't that the Loving case?
Yeah, Loving v. Virginia or Texas. Just pick your red state.
Yeah.
It was an anti-Loving case.
Yeah, and so that was only. Yeah. That was 15 years before Roe v. Wade. So in 15 years, you saw this massive progression, and it's the same thread, I should say. So it's this notion that there's this privacy and intimacy to marriage, and there's this sort of recognition of a constitutional right to have a sexual relationship, which is not in the Constitution, but that they found this right to privacy in sort of this amorphous way. And
Tell that to the incels.
I mean, honestly, if anything seems implied by the Ninth Amendment, it would seem right to sex.
Yeah, but and you don't have to go. A lot of states had laws against sodomy, which were only enforced against homosexual couples
until 2005. And that's how long ago this stopped happening.
And so, how else are Christians going to preserve their virginity, though?
That's a good point.
It's worked for Mike Pence. But the issue is just that same thread that carried them through from what I think are widely recognized as good decisions in privacy, in terms of anti-miscegenation laws and things like that. You end up with Roe v. Wade very logically. And so it carried through in 15 years, very fast. And I think that looking back on it, people are like, oh, well, the country wasn't ready. And the court, I think that if you would ask the judges from that court, would have said, we're not basing this on public opinion. This is just what we think is entailed in this thing that we're starting to define. The right to have sex implies the right to manage your own reproductive health. And so it is odd now to see 45 years later, as every other right has seemed to progress, that this fight over abortion, and I think in part because people don't understand what abortion is. Nobody knows what it means to have an abortion. It's such a taboo topic to talk about that nobody addresses the difference between abortion, which is very similar to Plan B, where you take a pill, and that's the extent of it, and that is really the vast majority of abortions, versus abortions which are much more surgical and where it is a real procedure, and that's where you start to see
liposuction of the vagina.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, when people talk about partial birth abortions, which are an extremely small percentage and only done under specific medical circumstances, the whole idea is that, look, I mean, I really do think that the right plays with truth a lot more than the left, and they consistently use dishonesty and the idea of trying to manipulate people who don't really know. They want people to believe that all these abortions are being done are being done like in the hell houses that Mike Huckabee would prop up, and where we're just a vacuum and just a completely blood-soaked room, because they don't want people to be told that the vast majority of abortions are no different than what a woman does when she has her period. She's flushing out a fertilized egg that's not going to make it to full term.
And how do they feel about Plan B?
They're against it.
They're against it also.
A lot of these people are against condoms because this isn't about life. This is about punishing whores.
I don't even think it's about that per se. I think that whenever we start getting to when we start as a country start getting to a point where whites are projected to be the minority in the country within the next, let's say, 20 to 50 years, then I feel like all of this anti-abortion, anti-contraceptive thing comes into play, because I think it's a white supremacist, white nationalist ideal that
no way.
women, they need to start producing more white children.
It has nothing to do with race. It has to do with
I'm going to
religion.
disagree, but I'm going to also say that this is another movement within the white nationalists and the white supremacists that they are doing stealthing. And if you read a lot of these like alt-right blogs, they're telling men to stealth women, which is basically you have sex with a woman, you're wearing a condom, and right before you come, you take the condom off, because they're trying to impregnate more white women because they want to increase the population of white people.
Does that work?
Stealthing?
Do they not notice? Because, I mean, it's sort of like... Because I hear this a lot.
Are you
I'm not
looking
making a joke.
for Saturday?
No, I'm not making a joke. What I'm trying to say is, I hear this a lot, this idea of men taking off condoms in the last second. Like, isn't there like a gigantic difference between how sex with and without a condom feels?
Yeah, but if that one pump is the pump that counts, then they're already
I mean, I get
fucked.
it. I get it. I guess I feel like I just don't. It surprises me that it's not
like,
like, hey, this sex just got significantally better.
And how is that even legal?
So
well,
it's not legal.
In some
not.
states, it's
really
not. In some states, there's really. Well, I'm going to defer to you for that.
No, so there's been a big push to make it illegal. It sort of fell into like the kind of revenge porny category of things that should obviously be illegal, but that might not be. I think it is illegal now in New York. I want to say. I think that I remember reading something about a law being passed or modified.
Yeah. But it's not illegal everywhere.
No. It's definitely not. It is. I should take that back. I think that it might be illegal in some way. I don't know that it wouldn't. It might not qualify as like rape or sexual assault everywhere.
Counts as breaking and entering.
But I mean, I do think it's
Forced impregnation.
I was gonna say it is. Now that you mentioned it, I feel like I have heard of somebody saying that like the alt-right movement. I also think there's like this weird. I mean, intersectionality always comes up on the left, but there's an intersectionality of racist and misogynist, and it's like a very close Venn diagram.
And they're doing such a better job of the intersectionalism than we are.
It just seems to go so much more naturally there. But I do think that, I mean, going back to your point about like the racial component to reproductive health, the Times did a huge article not that long ago about how if you're Black or Hispanic in America, you're way more likely to have your infant mortality rate is through the roof compared to white women. You're more likely to meet the doctor delivering your child on the day of the delivery. Like all of these things and I think there is a real class component to it in terms of preserving this sort of waspy upper crust to America that really I think even uneducated, poor white people cling to, that like, oh, well, I could aspire to that because at least I'm not that.
Right.
And there's that otherness to it.
Well, because poor white people are always reminding themselves that, I am like 2 weeks of hitting the books away from being a CEO somewhere.
Exactly.
Like, they just know that, like, I could be something if I just tried.
I'm one lottery ticket away.
Well, I feel like poor white people have a real, like, bullied child syndrome where they're like, oh, well, I'm going to make poor Black people's lives way worse than mine because rich white people are stepping on me, so I need somebody below me to keep down.
And the shit rolls down.
Yeah, and so I think that's the history of America right there.
Right.
But as far as the abortion issue, I don't think it has much to do with race as it has enough to do with religion.
Well, I don't think it's a conscious decision, I think it is what it is. It's not like people are saying, because I'm white, I want to make sure there aren't abortions. It's because, I mean, there's the other side of that, which is one of the most dishonest arguments I've heard against abortion from people who just don't have a good one is the eugenics argument, where people try to claim that abortion was created to kill Black people. Mm-hmm. And the problem is the people who make that argument tend to hate Black people. So they're trying to tell Black people in bad neighborhoods, in poor neighborhoods, saying, "Oh, don't get an abortion. That's just white people wanting there to be less Black people." It's like, no, you just want more poor Black people, and you're just you're pretending you care about that because you just don't like abortion.
If you believe in the Bible, you just are against abortion.
Well, I'd also say that there are huge populations of Black people of color that are highly religious, and you never see them on this like pro-life tip. Like, when have you ever seen like these big mega church like Black?
Very against gay marriage. They were huge.
We're talking about
That's
abortion.
true.
But
But
it's-
that was
but
another
it's-
thing.
It's the
That was
same-
another thing where
but it's
they
the
went
same
against.
religious. It's the same religious thing.
Because you would think that a black church would not support gay marriage or being pro-abortion when they know that it's cozying up to the side of politics that hates them, the side of politics that is much more comfortable with white supremacy.
Wait,
But
do you mean a book that was written like 3,000 years ago was not the vanguard of social movements? Like that's wait a minute.
for its time,
Unfortunately so.
This
it
is
had some good
blowing me
ideas
away.
for its time.
Yeah, the
Not even
stoning
really.
sections
I'm
didn't age
still,
well.
I'm
but, like-
still against mixing fabrics.
yeah. No, sorry, I didn't mean to just take a
Yeah,
shot
yeah.
across the bow at religion altogether. But I mean, yeah, that's
that is a big. I hate to say it, but that's kind of the big enemy.
It also doesn't say anything about abortion in the Bible anyway. So I don't see. I mean, there isn't actually anything in the Bible about abortion, right?
No, and the thing that's so crazy is that like the first contraceptive was in Egypt, like around the time of Cleopatra, where they used to actually cut a lemon in half and insert it in the woman because they figured out that the lemon would change the pH balance and would kill sperm. So like that was like the first contraceptive was
Actually,
actually
the first
a lemon.
contraceptive was a picture of Cleopatra. Have you seen the coins with her face on them? She was the ugliest human being who ever lived.
I
No,
think
seriously, she was white and she was hideous.
Wait a minute. Let's not let this conversation go down without evaluating the sexual attractiveness of a woman that lived 3,000 years ago.
No, seriously.
Because, goddamn it, that is what we're here to talk
I'm
about.
going to bring up a picture of Cleopatra right now. I want you to see what a dog she was.
I mean, I'm sure she didn't have the Kim K booty, but I mean, do we need to say the woman was a dog? I mean,
Yes, we do, because that is one of the worst mistakes in world history. People think Cleopatra was hot, and I'm telling you, she was a heifer. Wait, watch.
Just to bring this up to being to par here, Mark Antony also hideously unattractive.
Oh my God, yeah, they looked alike too.
They he was also grotesque.
That's a coin of Cleopatra from her time, meaning she had to approve it.
Yeah, but if you show me a coin of somebody from our time that looks great.
Yeah, but come on, that
She looks Jewish with that nose.
yes, she does. Well, she was Greek. She was Greek. She was ancestor of Ptolemy.
I'm wondering about the pain of that lemon. Does that sounds like it would burn?
Well, I mean, hopefully.
If you're dirty, I don't know if you know this, but Motley Crue would spray lemon on women's vaginas to see if they had any problems down there, and if they didn't wince, it meant they were safe.
That
So-
has to be a wives' tale. Not that Motley Crue. They definitely.
Oh, no,
did
they
that.
definitely did it.
They
I'm not saying
definitely-
it
but
worked.
does not
Yeah.
work.
I'm not saying that it works to no disease. Really, it just makes sure they don't have any open sores at the time, which, is half the battle. We've all been there, guys.
So they're sterilizing the area before insertion.
I forgot where we started on this one. I'm gonna be
Well,
honest.
which sounds like a perfect time to take a break. So we will take a break and we'll be right back.
Quick, open the door. Someone,
Yeah, Jesus.
love of God.
It's hot.
Everyone get out. I don't know what is with the ventilation here.
Well, this room is still not as hot as the other room.
We know what it is that there's no. I actually work in this building. So there's no.
Nothing's coming through there.
There's no HVAC control in the interior offices. So somebody has a window office that controls this whole block, and they're cold all the time. So they keep it all the way up because
Welcome to Blamestorming. Blamestorming. In a post-truth world, there's plenty of blame to go around. 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 Join Dave Sirus and Maryssa Smith as they blamestorm about today's hot topics.
Hey, welcome to Blamestorming. I'm your host, Dave Cyrus. My other host here is
Maryssa Smith.
Today joined by
Gary Levitt.
and
Pete Brocker.
all right, that feels professional. How you doing, guys?
Excellent, thank you.
We were just talking about all the horrible ways we could all die. Now, we were talking about nuclear war real quick, and the idea that maybe feels like maybe we're closer to it than we've been before.
Well, according to what is it, that midnight clock? We're what, a minute and a half from midnight now?
The doomsday clock.
Doomsday clock,
that's-
yeah.
Personally, I've always kind of resented the idea that the doomsday clock has any idea how close we are to all dying. It seems really arbitrary. I mean, I like the sentiment. I like the idea that we're saying, hey, here's the reasons we should be more careful about nuclear war. But also, we all agree that, like, the minute and a half away just seems really stupid, right?
I like the doomsday clock. I'll say
I do
it.
too.
I think, well, it's also like the smartest scientists in the world who are behind it, and they
There's
take.
to get your shit together because you're all going to die.
Yeah, and I know that it's coming from a good place.
Does that just take the pressure off for you? Is that why you like it?
No, well, yeah. We're a minute and a
I mean,
half
I
away. I'm
can't-
just gonna.
I can't stop anything anyway. Might as well have that extra beer.
It's just telling people to not
eat
pay
that
back
extra
their loans.
taco.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Screw-
have that extra cake.
Screw your student loans. Don't quit smoking.
As though they could pay them off in the first place.
Your watch is
Like
just
that.
the countdown
But
clock.
I feel like I'm kind of like, I don't know, maybe I'm like pessimistically optimistic because I still do the same thing, like screw everything, we're probably all going to die. But at the same time, I took out cancer insurance. So I'm just like, maybe I'll live through this.
There's a thing called cancer
that's-
insurance.
Yeah,
super specific.
I do have cancer insurance. And I have a rider for like exotic diseases.
Do you have regular insurance? Because
Yeah,
I
I've
feel like
got-
that should just be grouped in with that. Like,
It's not though. So like with the cancer insurance, like let's say if I were, it only works for internal cancers, but like let's say if I get a cancer, this will pay me for like, you know, have like up to I think a year and a half being out of work, and then it'll also pay for any sort of experimental medications that I might want to take that I wouldn't be able to afford.
So you just like stand in front of the microwave now? You're just waiting. That's the only way this is going to work out.
Got to
for
get
you?
your money's worth, you know.
I figured it out. If I got cancer, Lyme's disease, and I got hit by a car in the same year, like I'd make more money than I ever have in my entire life.
Let's
I thought you were
almost
gonna say
help-
break even.
No.
Like that's some expensive
The,
insurance.
No,
the
like-
cancer insurance would be
Well,
like,
that's
you're
how
actually
insur-
dying of Lyme's disease.
That's how
so-
copays usually work. It's like if I get sick, I really hope I get sick again this year because then it's free.
Right.
That's like when I first got my health insurance from like my old job. It was like they were explaining like, see what you're saying is if I can break my leg in January, I can get all the cancer I want till December for free. It's a good system.
Well, that's like,
Yeah.
there's no time in life to be more careful than when you haven't hit your deductible and it's like December 1st.
Oh my god,
Yeah.
yeah.
Time to lock it up. Like,
Yeah. But yeah, no, I've got like like accident insurance, like yeah. I'm the most
You worry too much.
so you're
Maryssa.
yeah,
I'm like
very concerned about the immediate future.
It's got hypochondria insurance.
it's probably in there. No, it was like super cheap and like
I'm just-
so at my job there was like we had like a few people that ended up with like brain cancer, and then like after the last one with brain cancer died, then they started offering us cancer insurance that's like literally the cup of coffee like a week. And so like it's like my cancer insurance is probably like $10 a week extra, and
Oh
I'm
my
just
god,
like,
there's no way this is a real insurance.
Wait a minute. Why
This-
are so many people? Where do you work? Are you working at like a nuclear power plant? And
no, I work in Connecticut, but like we had 4 people with brain cancer like in my office, and I think only 2 of them died. But like,
The
yeah.
problem is the office. This is not a
Yeah.
series of
Maybe there's
coincidences.
some rays going around there.
Though I do want to say I am happy that as a black person in America, you're this sure you're going to die of natural causes.
Oh,
He did
well,
it pretty quick on
yeah,
this episode.
you know.
yeah, that was,
It took him like 10 minutes last episode.
Well, I usually
He normally announces it.
Well, I usually only make sure the audience knows she's black on one of the 2 halves of the episodes. So
I'm
this time I'm
beige.
doing it on both halves.
I'm
Look,
beige. Does that not count?
People need to know, otherwise they might think I'm racist.
They already know I'm your only black friend, Dave.
Yes.
Oh my God, you guys are friends.
I mean,
I mean, for the show.
in
Would
comedy,
you be
it's,
friends if she were white?
it's a nebulous thing in comedy. Oh no, we would have been friends much earlier. Now, I have a question for everybody. You're a lawyer. And of course our other guest is here to replace a lawyer. So let's pretend you have some
I
sort of
play a
degree.
lawyer in real life.
You've heard of people talking about ICE. ICE is a big story right now, and some Democrats have called for the abolishing of ICE. That to me sounds like just sort of what we were saying about all politics now becomes extreme simply to be listened to, because it's not like a majority of Democrats.
But it's a dumb move because it plays right into
Yeah.
the false narrative that Republicans are spewing out, the president included, who's saying Democrats want open borders when Democrats do not want open borders.
It's essentially like saying if you want there to be police reform, that means you believe there shouldn't be police.
Right, exactly. This black and white argument where people can't handle nuance.
I'll play devil's advocate in this one. I kind of agree on getting rid of ICE, but I also don't think that the opposition to getting rid of ICE makes any sense. So first, I think we need to know what ICE does, right, before we can really talk about whether or not we should get rid of them. So there's a difference. There's Customs and Border Patrol, which, like, when you come in through from Mexico to the U.S. or through JFK, or you ship something from China, they're the ones that deal with it. They're the ones on the border, standing guard, saying, like, yes, no, give me your kid, whatever the case may be. Then there's ICE, which is like the investigative arm, which operates internally in the U.S., nowhere near a border, and says, like, hey, you're living a nice life in Philadelphia, working and being responsible, raising some kids. Come with me. I'm going to ship you back to a country you've never seen.
Right.
And so ICE has a much different mandate. They do occasionally work near the border. They don't have to work at the border. They're the ones internally who investigate standing deportation orders and things like that and try and kick people out affirmatively who are already in Indiana.
They're like the bounty hunters of Border Patrol.
Yeah,
So,
they're like,
like,
the,
Oh yeah.
ICE was involved with capturing El Chapo.
really?
Yeah.
So
I thought that was
well,
Sean Penn.
I feel like that might just be
Like-
because
No, he was trying to escape on a block of ice that day.
well, I knew the DEA was, and the military is actually very involved in Latin America generally and things like that.
But the exact problem is that you're bringing up is just on the very basics of the
What do
optics
they
of
do?
it. It's what these Democrats are talking about is replacing ICE.
Well, I think
With
what they're talking about is just merging the responsibilities of ICE with the Department of Justice, which I think it makes sense. I actually have a huge problem with ICE and with any specific role law enforcement, eviction pleas, immigration pleas, because what you get is this weird incentive to overplay your hand. Then now they have to justify their existence based on this one metric, and if they do their job really, really well, they don't exist anymore. So, like,
So you're against traffic cops.
well, no, because traffic cops are usually just
They're
within the
They're reporting to the same person a beat cop is reporting to
Oh, I
up the
see.
chain. It's not an entirely different.
Its
Organization.
Yeah, so
Okay.
and I think that if you look at it, like we're actually experiencing, and we have experienced for the past decade, some of the highest eviction rates in history in this country, higher than the Great Depression, because during the Depression there were no eviction cops.
Right.
And try and get like Patty O'Sullivan, who was absolutely a cop in New York City in 1930. I'm going to say it.
They all had accents.
Try and get him to evict somebody. He didn't want to do it. That's not why he signed up. And so when the neighbors rallied, he would walk away. Eviction police, they're like, oh, it's Tuesday. This is all I do.
Right.
ICE is a very similar mentality, I think, of like,
It's the end of the month. I got to hit my quota.
and it turns into the enemy. If you're an eviction cop, the enemy is the tenant. If you're an immigration cop, the enemy is the immigrant.
Right. If you work for ICE, you're a hammer, and every brown person is a nail.
And not to say that there aren't people that joined ICE for great reasons, and like I'll play that card. Like there might be a few good apples, but like, I mean, there are thousands of ICE agents, and honestly,
There are a few good apples, but they're being picked by the people they're sending out of the country.
and I think the real issue here is that, I mean, once you start creating all of these niche police forces, it's not that hard to create one that deals with political dissidents. And at that point, like that's a problem. We already have in this country prisons, CMUs, which nobody talks about and nobody really knows about.
So what is the CMU?
It's a political prison. You're there because you're basically a high value prisoner, but in reality, it's because you're Muslim.
What does it stand for? What is that?
Communications Management Unit. And what it is you just don't have contact with the outside world.
Are those all outside of the United States? Are those
No,
black?
those are it's internal at supermax prisons or maximum security prisons run by the federal government. There's only 2 or 3 in the U.S. They have a few. They have the last time I saw anything about it, there were like 600 or 700 people in there, and they do have white inmates in there, like eco-terrorists and things like that.
That's nice.
But they're called even the guards at the prisons will blatantly refer to them sometimes as just balancers. They're there so that the charts don't.
Doesn't look bad.
They have to have a certain percentage,
so they don't sway the
and
statistics.
they'll just cycle them through. But yeah, so that is a true political prison right there, and they already exist. So to have,
and they're not black ops; they're just run right here.
No, they actually, in enacting CMUs, they broke the law. There was a specific procedure you had to go through to enact something like that, and they did not do it. There's been no oversight of it, and there's been no call to reform it because out of sight, out of mind. And that's the real enemy, I think, at the end of the road of these specific police forces, and why I actually really do support, I think, the rolling in of ICE with the Department of Justice and merging it with either the FBI or...
I feel like most Americans hadn't even heard of ICE before the Trump administration.
I think they all still thought it was INS.
Right.
Yeah, INS was like that was a pop culture reference that I grew up with. It was like, oh, it's the INS.
So what's the difference between INS and ICE?
INS was there's a huge reshuffle under Bush. I think it was under Bush. Of the federal bureaucracy, and one of the things that happened was that the INS was essentially done away with, and CBP and ICE were created with their new mandates, which nobody still understands. Which is why you have things like apparently ICE dealing with El Chapo, even though that would seem to be outside of their mandate,
right?
Because they're the immigration police kicking people out. So bringing in a Mexican national to be tried for crimes would seem to not be within their gambit. But that's my 2 cents on why I do like the idea of getting rid of ICE. So
that's the problem, is that it's not that getting rid of ICE is something that we shouldn't be talking about. It's that we have a president who doesn't really engage in actual discussions about politics. It's entirely about optics and about whatever he thinks the people who know the least about the issue will agree with. So he hears, that's why he uses MS-13 constantly as this example that every single person who enters this country illegally is essentially responsible for all gang violence. I mean, Trump's coalition, Trump's real base is the hatred of brown foreigners. I know that's a really simplistic way of saying it, but it kind of is.
Instilling fear, yeah.
It's about.
I kind of agree with that. I do think that there's a square rectangle issue here, because I do think that you can support Trump and not love some of his messages on like the racism and misogyny, because again, I know we were talking about it a little while ago, just the abortion issue. I think really there are so many single issue voters out there who vote Republican because of the abortion issue. But at the same time,
and guns. If a lot of people are voting just because it's either fetuses or guns that they feel are more important than everything else, every other issue they could talk about.
And they don't like identity politics coming from the left as well.
But I think I do think that if you are racist in America or you are misogynist in America, you are Republican.
Yeah,
but I also feel like that's an identity. I think that the right is constantly saying that they're against identity politics, but their whole political spectrum is based on their own identity of either being religious or white nationalist, or that they're conservative fiscally or whatever, which is their own identity.
Identity politics isn't something to be celebrated, but usually when people say how much they hate identity politics, what they really mean is
they
I
don't
hate
identify
the fact that,
with other people.
What they mean is I hate the fact that I lost the culture war. And the Republican Party banked on a culture war that they lost spectacularly with anti-gay, anti-black. They relied on the Southern strategy. They relied on a lot of things that did not work, and now they are finding themselves trying to completely reimagine the party based entirely on worshiping one of the worst pieces of shit in American history.
Yeah, Democrats have no message, and
I don't agree with that, but sorry, go on.
I think one thing that they should do is kind of showcase somehow, and unleash some sort of marketing campaign where you showcase all these kids that are shooting up schools. They're all white kids. The face of a terrorist is always a brown Middle Eastern person that looks like me, when it's really white people that are shooting up schools. Wait,
did you just call yourself brown? Sorry,
and Middle Eastern.
Yeah, and Middle
Yeah,
I thought you were Italian.
Yeah.
I've been removed from an airplane before.
I was going to say Lithuanian.
Yeah, because you
the
were
way I
drunk.
look.
I was going to say you look Lithuanian at worst.
Yeah,
I look whatever you want me, whatever you see. I'm like kind of a chameleon that way. But I have been removed from a plane because the flight crew, quote, didn't feel comfortable flying with me.
Did you have your pants on?
What else happened on that flight?
Yeah.
Word of advice, do not read the Quran on an airplane.
Wow.
While on shrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. I do think the Democrats have no clear message.
I think the problem with that is that you can't have a clear message unless that message is some sort of catastrophic break from modern society. The problem is the message has to. The only message people respect is something completely different than the world you have. So if you think that Obama's America was kind of in the right direction, they're basically saying, I'm too bored to be happy with that.
Wait, I think here's the issue with the Democratic Party, right? Democrats are telling people to read Time magazine, and the Republicans are saying, hey, I have porn. It's a race to the brainstem. Like, the Republicans are saying fear, hatred, anger. Boom, you're my party.
Right.
Democrats are saying, wait a minute, inclusion, like happiness, success. And people are like, wait a minute, I can just jerk off to the fear and anger. I don't need this shit. This is like
It's reptilian. It's trying to take advantage of your reptile brain.
Sensationalism.
They're trying to drag us back into caves.
And that's why Donald Trump does, I actually tend to think that he might not be as dumb as I always say he is because he is so good at just cutting through the issue to that core kernel of what is going to scare and anger people in my camp.
I wouldn't call that intelligence.
I've met him. He's like a fucking toddler. He's so.
Did you meet him?
Yeah, he is ridiculously stupid. He can't even have a basic conversation.
All right, you
and I can't tell that much of the story because of NDAs. But I actually recently had a conversation with someone else who knows someone who is about to. Either someone who just left or was about to leave the White House, and said the dangerous thing about him is I've had arguments with people who didn't know. I've had arguments with people I disagreed with. I've never had an argument with someone who didn't know what they were saying.
Right, exactly.
Wait, did you sleep with Donald Trump?
No, I wish. Believe me, I would have.
No,
I would have taken that for the team.
He's not concerned with facts. He just throws stuff out there.
But they were saying that it's not even that. It's that he doesn't even know what he's talking about, and that he argues just as hard as someone who does, and that it's impossible to even. You can't really have an argument with him because he doesn't even understand what he's saying.
Exactly.
Well, that's the entire right. That is how he has captivated his audience.
And that's the strange thing is because the right has such a short memory. Because I was just listening to this this segment on MSNBC, and they were talking about how he ran like back in '99 under like Ross Perot's party, and so he was talking about Buchanan, and he was saying how Buchanan was
a Reform Party. And that like Buchanan was racist and he was sexist and he was against the gays and he was against the blacks, and he can't believe anyone could possibly follow someone that was so divisive and was like trying to like divide voters so much, and like you actually believed him when he said that he thought that Buchanan was wrong for saying all these divisive and disgusting things. He also said they were wrong for having David Duke part of the party.
Right. He also said he has the best steaks ever created.
And he says his hair is real.
And
but,
water.
you know.
Well, the hair is real. It's just transplanted. But go on.
But, like, now these are all of the tenets of the things that he's running on. And so, like, I don't know so much as is he as dumb as we think he is? Is he, like, just an ultimate puppet? Like, does someone have, like, all the lube and hand up his ass that is just kind of maneuvering him around? Or, you know, is he just a fucking evil genius? Like, I don't really know.
None of that. I think he's just trying to become popular.
I think it's just an 8th grader seems like a genius to 6th graders. That's all this is to me. I think he's good at manipulating people who are dumber than him.
He's trying to become class president, so he's promising everybody everything.
I also think that
saying things that get
he hasn't
him
promised
vote.
me shit.
He doesn't need you.
Exactly. He's got
you
enough
might be outside of the scope of what he's arguing for.
But he plays into the Nazi hand where you might think he hates Jews, but then he plays into the Jew hand. So he somehow has the loyal following of Orthodox Jews. Then he has the loyal following of people that hate Jews.
Well, Orthodox Jews, as a Jew, I will say this, are traitors to us. The ones who support him.
Oh my God!
Absolutely.
This is actually one of my favorite things in the world is to listen to the intra-Jew fighting.
Yeah,
it's so much fun.
As a Jew, I live in Midwood. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, this is my favorite thing in the world because I love listening to an Orthodox Jew talk about people that aren't Orthodox Jews. It's like you might as well be an evangelical. It is the most fun thing.
They are evangelicals. They have the Orthodox community, by and large, has become an evangelical community that cares about nothing but the domination of the Middle East.
That's what I was saying in the other episode. It's not about race or anything. Or class. It's about religion.
See, I don't even think it's about religion. I don't think they believe in their religion. I think they use it as a club against us. I think that they use their religion to exercise their authoritarian desires.
Well, that's all religion. I mean, all religion goes back to the in and out of just, again, like the reptile brain. Like, give me my in-group. I want my in-group. You're my out-group.
It's the opiate of the masses.
In 1960, the Jewish population of Midwood, Brooklyn was so liberal that John F. Kennedy was considered too conservative.
Jews used to be liberal.
And Jews are still liberal, just not the religious ones, because religious Jews have basically decided they care more about being, I think, religious than Jewish. Because they side with the evangelicals who can't wait for them to all die in a fire in Israel when Jesus comes back, which is why they want Israel to be in control, want the Jews in control of Israel. I think at the end of the day, it's not even about the religion anymore. They just like this world of control.
But they love the fact that Trump is supporting Israel. And Obama, unfortunately, lost the support of Orthodox Jews because he wasn't on Israel's side no matter what.
But he
talk
was on
about
Israel's
talk
side.
about Donald Trump not knowing what he's doing. Donald Trump signed a formal document, which no president before him had done, stating that he would never attempt to take Israel's nuclear weapons away. Now, there had always been a gentleman's agreement that they wouldn't, that all disarmament would exempt Israel in the same way that the U.S. has never realistically tried.
But that's why he's like, yeah, I'll sign this document, whatever. It doesn't
He
mean
had
anything.
no idea that the other Netanyahu, right, was who we met with like the third day he was in office. Just showed up with a document and said, "Here, sign this," and he did, and in a way that like only Donald Trump could be that naive and that I know everything.
Stupid.
Yeah, it's just
Because
overconfident.
Trump supporters believe that the entire world geopolitically is extremely simple and that all these people that they've seen, these politicians, are lying to them and pretending this is complicated to keep their jobs because they don't want to believe that anything more complicated than they can understand exists. That's why they hate climate science. That's why they hate science in general.
But he's also someone that went into the meeting with Kim Jong-un saying, I don't need to prepare. I just shoot from the hip.
Well, he said that because he knew that he's not capable of preparing, so it's safer for him to say, oh, well, I didn't prepare after it happens.
Just that alone should alarm every American, no matter what you
The
are.
people who support him believe in the concept that you shouldn't prepare for things. The people who support him look at him and say, I think that this country could be perfect if only the president yelled more. They don't really understand the concept of negotiation, of any intricacy of anything. That's why they love him so much. He's telling them the world is actually what you wish it was, an extremely simple place where the loudest person wins, and that's it. They think that he's reversing the concept of intelligence throughout the entire country and that the stupid are smart and the smart are stupid. He's basically doing the same thing to us that happened when the Shah was overturned in Iran and every redneck became the new leader of their prefecture.
so. I think I actually not to respond directly to that because well done, but I do think if you were a billionaire who only cared about himself and maybe his favorite 2 or 3 kids.
He only cares about one.
Yeah, he wants to sleep with her. But like,
We're assuming that he hasn't. I'm just saying.
I mean, oh, that would be the most spectacular Me Too moment.
In all seriousness, though, how many people would he lose?
If it came out he slept with his own daughter,
Just his wife.
Would he lose? I'm going to say he would lose half his followers.
I don't
honestly,
even think half. I don't.
No, he'd lose half. Let's be fair.
I don't think that he would, because I think they would say that it was God that put him in that situation, and that everyone is a sinner, and now he's redeemed, and now this is like the underdog.
See,
like
Maryssa, you're 100% wrong. They would just immediately come out and say she was never his daughter. That you're missing the way these people work. Also, if it was Tiffany, then they would go against him.
they would never engage with it. They call it fake news and move on a minute later. Yeah. But
They would say if she came out and said it, they would say she's the deep state forced her to do it.
I think that's the tape. Honestly, like the P tape, I think that is the tape, and that he will do anything that Putin says just so that tape doesn't come out.
The problem with the P tape is just like we said earlier. He's going to say it's computer graphics.
But do you see how close we're getting to North Korea type of stuff? Kim Jong-un has millions of supporters.
Yeah.
They love him.
Well, because you're much happier believing that your president is God than believing you are the dumbest human beings on the current planet.
I mean, I think
What's that Mark Twain quote? It's easier to fool someone than it is to convince them that they've been fooled.
Well, yeah.
that's a great quote.
We are experiencing the world's biggest con right now.
But I actually think though it could mean again if you give Donald Trump any credit as an intelligent animal, if you're a billionaire, if you're a tycoon, and you genuinely don't care about poor people and minorities, why would you care about climate change? Because the first people impacted, and honestly, potentially the only people impacted, depending on what happens, they could literally fly away to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and ride this one out for the next 50 years. In their compounds, that's what the Waltons are doing. The Walmart heirs have built this doomsday prepper-esque bunker that would fit on any apocalyptic TV show.
It's the plot of Superman, for God's sake.
But so why would he care? And why would any of them care? So that's our new government, is the Goldman Sachs billionaires.
It's the same reason why we have such bad education in this country. We talk about education. We've been talking about how bad education is in America for 40 years, and Trump's presidency is the culmination of that. We're seeing what happens when you hit a 50% tipping point of people being terrifyingly ignorant. And the same thing. Why would Republicans want education to be good? They don't. Their attitude is, we really only need like 150 smart people in the whole country.
Well, I will say, talk about. I think we were talking about it earlier. The impact of the Supreme Court in just society in general. The reason education is so screwed up and disparate in this country is really just a couple of Supreme Court decisions that the fight has just. I mean, if we could have a Roe v. Wade fight on something on the left, this is where I stake my ground out on these two education decisions. One saying that you can't bus kids, and the other one saying that school funding from one district can't be distributed to another district.
Yeah. We're seeing the culmination of two problems here. We don't have good education, but we have the best entertainment in the world.
Well, entertainment is an industry.
We make the best movies. We make the best music. And that's why we have Donald Trump.
But let's be fair.
He's a good entertainer.
I would say the exact opposite, actually, because Donald Trump is not because of entertainment. It's the opposite. He's because of reality shows, which is anti-entertainment. Donald Trump happened because the two things combining reality TV and the internet. In reality TV, you're rewarded for how bad a person you are, and on the internet, there's no consequences for being a bad person. Entertainment, narrative entertainment, is the antithesis of Trump because it involves creativity, and that's why Republicans are very anti-narrative. I don't know if you know this. They don't really watch narrative shows. They mostly only watch reality TV. They mostly only watch documentary-style shows, not documentaries.
And they're always talking about the fake narrative that the left is pushing forward. It's like, counter to your point, is that any time that it looks like something has a beginning, middle, and end, they're completely against it, and that's fake.
And I was just going to say the one thing about entertainment, don't forget, entertainment is the only goddamn industry we're good at anymore. It's the only thing America's at the top of anymore.
And not for long.
Technology as well.
Also, again, I think that is something that, if you want to talk about, like, what is the impact of the Republican set of priorities in the next 20 years? I think we're very blinded by our social issues right now, and I think that for good reason, because those have the most obvious human impact.
Right.
But what you don't have are like the failure to scenarios. If you don't have DARPA and defense spending where it was in the 80s, say, you don't have the internet. And so if you don't have the internet, you don't have like anything that goes along with it. Artificial intelligence is set back at least a generation or two.
I think I might be okay with that, though.
It doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter if you have the internet, because all these Trumpers have the internet, but they don't research on their own. They still just regurgitate what.
But the internet made trillions of dollars. Is the point?
And my point is that so like if you don't have that R&D funding from the government, because all they want really the federal government to do, if I understand the Republican ideology correctly, is make sure poor people stay poor and shoot a whole bunch of foreign people.
Yeah,
that's really all. They just want a military. They don't want social programs, even though they benefit them disproportionately. They don't want distribution of interstate taxes, even though, again, disproportionately benefits red states. They don't want all of the things that are helping them. And so if at the end of the day, all you have is a bunch of F-18s and F-22s, what does that leave out? What kind of medical funding is being pulled?
But this is how short-sighted and dumb humans are, because Now you can never take Social Security away. Well,
People say that,
It's
but-
going to happen, though.
Republicans love Social Security.
No, but what you can do is privatize it into oblivion.
The problem is they would never say take it away. But if Donald Trump said, "I swear to God, give me the Social Security, I'll do it. I want to do with it, and we're gonna all make," he would not
It's
lose
gonna be
one
bigger
support.
and better.
He would not lose one voter, and it would all be gone. And then they would all say, "Man, those Democrats really screwed up
But
his
if their
plan."
Social Security check went down 1 month, they'd start to freak out.
I
Sure,
don't
but by
think
that
so.
point, it's
I
too
really
late.
don't.
It's too late, and they would never ever blame the person who did it.
They would say that they were taking one for the team, that they were making an investment in the future of America, and that this was a sacrifice that they needed to make for the country. I don't think that I really truly don't think that if the Social Security went down, that these Trump voters would they would be fine with it. I really think they'd be fine with it.
They don't believe anything negative about him.
But no, I think that's even bigger than that. I think even in the absence of Trump, right? Say we're fast forwarding 15 years, and Social Security's gone.
And Trump's still president.
Yeah, well,
It's
no,
going to be
gonna
like Don Jr. Exactly.
But no, I think if you fast forward, and then what happens when people are confronted with an unexpected crisis is not that they suddenly become open-minded, right? You never find your new ideology because in the middle of the worst moment of your life, like, oh, I finally reached across the aisle. No, they double down on conservative viewpoints and say the economy's not strong enough to give me a job, give me more conservative policies because I need a job. So cut corporate taxes, cut more social programs, give me my job.
Yeah, and the left and the right never has a come to Jesus moment, even though like we're both asking for the same things.
Well, it's even worse because the right will always have this nasty feedback loop that their own self-created crisis creates more fuel for conservatism and more anger and like rage towards foreigners taking our jobs and whatever else that is.
I think
Right,
we're
and all the
facing
fruit is
something new.
rotting, even though all these Mexicans were taking these jobs, but apparently no Americans wanted to take these jobs because the avocados are all rotting.
Now, and
That's
to
a
be
crime.
fair, I think that could be fixed by better minimum wage laws. But I also don't think that we should be trying to brutalize every Mexican who tries to enter the country either. But those are more complicated issues. I want to get into a Civil War discussion, but keep going. Sorry.
No, sorry. So all I was pretty close to that point though. Is that I think there's this very real feedback loop that really exists much stronger on the right, which is why I think it's much harder to pull right-wing voters. Is that anytime that you feel like you're in a moment of crisis, you internally sort of retract into your in-group and into your whatever your basest moments are. And so in that moment, if you're naturally suspicious of foreigners, that's going to increase. If you believe the Republican narrative that trickle-down economics works, you're going to want more of those policies. You're not going to suddenly say social programs were actually great. And I think that's why you can kill social programs. I think that for the last 70 or 80 years, people have said you can't. Once there's an entitlement, it just hasn't happened. That's less than a century. I mean, that's not that long of a time to not have a social program killed. So I think that you can do it. There's a smart way to do it, and there's a dumb way. Smart way, privatize it, and then you don't fund it. And then eventually it just dries up. Once it becomes like this amount of money that nobody cares about, it's gone forever. And they don't complain about it because you just change it to, well, we wouldn't need it if the liberals would let us enact more of our conservative policies and get you a job, Bill.
Were they able to get rid of the law where health insurances can deny you coverage if you have a pre-existing condition? They could not get rid of that from Obamacare.
You're saying, the House only voted on it like 47 times.
Exactly.
So-
No, but even when Trump took over, that was the one thing they couldn't get because everyone sees that
And they're
that's
desperate.
necessary.
They're desperate to get rid of it because.
But
But they can't, like Social Security. There's a couple things that
But Social Security doesn't have the benefit of having sick children as its poster child. Anytime you see a kid and say, this kid has leukemia, he's getting his treatment because of Obamacare, it's very difficult to argue against that. But Social Security, pull out the most derelict-looking person in the world and say, this is where your money's going.
But Social Security is really about the elderly.
So this 80-year-old guy who's slugging Bud Lights on his trailer porch, I mean, it's very easy to paint Social Security in a negative light in a way that it's very difficult to paint pre-existing conditions. Also, everybody can see themselves having a pre-existing condition. I don't know a single person that expects to be on Social Security.
maybe it's the second beer, but I was super optimistic on the first episode. Now this episode, I'm like, I was
Well, we're all
pessimistic on the
fucked.
other
We're
episode.
all
No.
fucked.
While we're on that subject, then, of your optimism, I have a
Yes.
question for everyone.
Okay.
In the Civil War, 600,000 people died. It was 2% of the population. More and more people today are expecting the possibility of us having a civil war, which does sound ridiculous when you think of it from today, but it's not the craziest thing in the world. I know that only a few years ago, Russia was predicting an American civil war, and everyone thought that was ridiculous because we didn't know what they were planning in relation to helping us get
That's
one.
what they want.
Right. That's what this has all been about. And here's a real question. I want you to picture a country, possible country we could be in if we had never had a civil war. Because, of course, all the other countries had gotten rid of slavery mostly before we did. We were not getting rid of it.
This is where the Republican talking points come to. Well, Republicans got rid of slavery.
Well,
Democrats
that's
wanted slavery.
The Liberal Party got rid of slavery before they switched in 1912. But the issue, because when the Bull Moose Party happened, they completely switched. So I know you don't. I know you know that, but it's something that just the most ignorant Republicans will
I
rely
found
on.
a new form of therapy. I have Trump friends on Facebook. So instead of arguing with family, I argue with Trumpers on Facebook. And it's great because I get an insight into their whole mentality.
And it's always really depressing when you realize how little they actually know, but compared to how confident they are in their point. But my question is, let's say we lived in a country right now where we still had slaves. You would agree that that is not worth the 600,000 people who died in the Civil War, right? You would agree. I think most people would agree they'd rather live in the world that we have today than a world that still had slaves, but those 600,000 Civil War fighters didn't die.
700, maybe not, but
2% of the population, or even say 2% of the population.
I will say. I also think. I mean, just let me throw this super liberal talking point in the middle of this one. There are still slaves.
Correct.
I do understand that's a real issue.
There's more slaves today than there've ever been in the history of the world.
Like
the world,
and not just like everybody thinks like, oh, sex slavery. No, like true.
There are Nigerians
and labor and like dislocating families.
The
whole nine is still happening today.
There are
not in the U.S.
There are
in the US.
Well,
Absolutely.
there are some examples we find of people from Nigeria or other parts of Africa who are then shipped here to be
Bangladesh and
to be
India.
domestic servants of people from places like Saudi Arabia and India. That does happen a lot.
There's even Americans. Like I was reading an article. It was like I believe it was like North Carolina or South Carolina, but that this restaurant owner kept a developmentally disabled black man as a slave for over 20 years.
I saw that.
And you know,
and these are obviously things we should be cognizant of. Yeah, because it does happen. But
so your question is, fuck those 600,000.
Well, I didn't get to my
answer.
question. I didn't get to my question yet. My question was the 600,000 people, the 2% of the population that died, so that we would no longer have slavery in this country. We overall think of that as a worthy
collateral damage
as worth it.
Well, also, it's only like really 300,000 because half were on the wrong side of that issue.
Yes.
So like, I'll go 1% on this one. Like it's 1% of the population that we really lost. The other 1% kind of deserved it.
But my question is, if in 150 years from now, you see America and that is an America entirely about who Trump is, where all politicians talk like Trump, all children emulate politicians like that, where our culture is Donald Trump's family, is avoiding that worth losing 2% of our population?
Absolutely.
I don't even think that it's going to come to that because I feel like...
Well, don't fight the hypothetical.
I'm going to throw a hypothetical at the hypothetical. So, like, I believe that the next world wars and possibly our next civil war is going to be a cyber war. So like I don't necessarily feel like yes, there's going to
fighting
be
it on Facebook.
There's going to be deaths on the ground for sure, but I think that most of the warfare is going to happen through the internet. I think it's going to be like, you know, groups like Anonymous or whatever that are transferring money from one group to another. I think that it's going to be
what I'm talking
down
about.
Grids.
What I'm talking about is what I think is a very possible, realistic outcome of Donald Trump gets impeached, and then hundreds of thousands of militia people decide this is the moment.
But I guess the question is, as with all civil wars in human history, where do the security forces come down?
Well,
not just the military, but where's the FBI? Where's the Secret Service?
Well, we know
where's the NYPD?
We know exactly whose side the FBI will be on, and that's because Trump decided to make them the enemy, like everyone else who has the capacity to tell Americans what he's done wrong.
Yes,
Right, and that's the group that's going to be able to shut down the grids in Middle America, where these militias are going to be. These are the people that are going to be able to turn off their power,
but I think
the
that's
water.
a departure from the argument.
I mean,
But I think that's
war still exists.
I mean, I don't.
We don't live in a world without war.
No, and
No.
I'm not saying that it's not a war, but what I'm saying is that we have the capability of having a more nuanced war than before. I don't think this is going to be blitzkrieg. I don't think that we're going to necessarily have to bomb whole towns. Like, if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, like, if you have, like, an entire county of, like, Minnesota that has turned anti-America, that is so separatist, that is trying to build bombs and terrorize the rest of the country.
Right.
Literally a tablespoon of anthrax, and that entire town is gone.
Yeah,
I
but the
think
American
that's
government
what
isn't going to use anthrax against people rebelling.
No, we fly in bombs in Philadelphia.
Yeah. No, we would attack them, but the thing is, it would be a lot more complicated than that.
But no, I actually think that you're onto something that
We're gonna have micro wars. Is my point. I don't think we're gonna have this big.
We'll have macro ones too. I mean, I don't think
this
we're
is
ever.
big.
I actually think you're both right, but I think that I actually disagree with your view of a cyber war will always be a nation to nation thing. I think.
But the one
Yeah, I
thing
don't
you got to
see
keep
how
in mind
it's
is that the people that want a cyber war are kind of more Trumpers, where they just want anarchy. They don't believe in the system.
I mean, I think
Which
that
is that 50% that hasn't voted that we don't know where they fall.
You're not going to use a cyber war to stop an army of people with guns.
But
You're
no,
going
I
to
actually
actually shoot them.
But no, I think that the real risk is I actually think the closest analog to what we are on the precipice of, which is again super inflated. Like, it's a very inflated argument, I will say up front, is Rwanda. In Rwanda, in the lead up, there was Radio Rwanda, and Radio Rwanda was really in the aftermath almost credited with the genocide. Without it, it was a but-for cause. Without it, it does not happen, was pretty much the report. Also, France. Just feel the need to call out France for just blatantly supporting the genocide. I think Mitterrand's son was running guns into the country during it. Mm-hmm. So go France and go fuck yourself. Just want to throw that out there because nobody calls him out on it. It's been 25 years and nobody's had the balls. It's like they're Turkey and they committed the Armenian genocide. Of course they did.
But as far as the cyber war stuff, I'm like maybe 4-6 years ago, liberals thought WikiLeaks was gonna save us all. They're crusaders of justice. Turns out they're not. They're just crusaders of anarchy. No. And it might be the same for Anonymous too.
But I actually think
where's Anonymous? They just disappeared.
No, they're around. They're just
anonymous.
They're not organized.
Yeah.
They're not organized. I've met people as part of Anonymous. I actually had a guy from Anonymous say, "Hey, a bunch of Anonymous people are going to go protest a Scientology building. Would you come with us?" Because I was at the time a very popular YouTube guy, and they were who would go to hate groups and make fun of them. Like, "Hey, come with us. We want you as Brick Stone to come." I'm like, "Oh, so all of you will be anonymous." Except me.
And no thanks.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stick with hate groups, not Scientology.
Yeah. Well, they might have had a point on that one. But
I mean, no, I'm not. Oh, no. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't protest Scientology. I'm saying I'm a lot more afraid of Scientology than the Westboro Baptist Church.
I'm afraid of both. But where I was going with it is that I think that the most likely... I actually think that my initial question about the military and the security forces really is definitive in most revolutions, but in all revolutions. I think that what we're on is not that. I think what we're on is private, individual to individual violence erupting in a very chaotic and sporadic way, in the way that you saw in Charlottesville, where just all of a sudden a guy decides to mow down a crowd. And I think that's what we're heading towards, and I think it's going to be pretty one-sided, honestly. I think that.
But let's say all the people that signed up to protest in Charlottesville, they I can't remember whatever on the right, whatever the umbrella cause was for that. Let's say that I was a hacker and I was able to get that list in advance of all the people that had signed up so that they could legally protest in that. And I went and I transferred all of their money. Now they can't get gas to drive there. They can't pay for they can't get their tiki torches. They can't get the hotels. They can't get the airfare. If I were able to get that list in advance, let's say, because they needed at least a month's time, and I'm just like, oh, you know something? These guys are all Nazis. Fuck these Nazis. I'm taking their money. This is the kind of thing that I'm talking about, the cyber warfare.
But we don't live in a
aspect of
world
it.
where that replaced war.
But yeah, wait, so I'm confused by the way
I don't
about
understand.
who would be doing that. Because first of all, I think that if we're living in a world where that's just happening, that's kind of the worst case scenario. Because now nobody's using banks anymore.
Yeah,
we're all
like,
just hiding money in our
that's the
mattresses.
But I
destruction of
feel
the
like we're
monetary
kind
system.
of already like to that point.
No, we're not.
Like,
we're
I
not
feel
at
like,
the point where banks don't exist anymore, and then
Yeah.
everyone's just stealing from banks.
No, I think that we're to the point where everyone is stealing from everyone, because I feel like I know my identity has been stolen.
But you don't. But you get it back.
But there's a rise of Bitcoin.
There's not like Chase is like, we lost it all. Like this is a
What if,
nuisance.
what if Bitcoin replaces banks and fake news replaces news?
Well, yeah, but these are all
We're not that
these
far.
are giant departures
Yeah, but
from
like,
like
again,
reality.
but then like, what if porn replaces relationships?
Yeah,
like that's.
I mean-
I
I
get
mean,
it.
we're
It's a-
there. Like,
Sex robots replaces.
But I'm just saying
partners.
it seems like a really weird kind of just departure from the argument. Like
Yeah,
just
I-
talk about
I-
a science
I-
fiction possibility.
I don't
of
really
But
think
we are
that it is,
closer.
though.
We are
I don't
closer.
think that it's that.
I don't think it's science fiction, but I also don't think that that's. I think
because I feel like I feel like the people that are kind of like moving forward the most right now are these. We as a society are moving away from any sort of interaction one-on-one. We can't talk to each other in public. That's why we have dating apps like we have Uber, because you don't want to actually talk to a driver of a taxi. I think that we're going to get to the point where even our warfare is going to be so removed that we're not going to have to interact with each other. It's just going to be about stealing each other's shit.
But I think that only works outside of the U.S. Because I think that I
But
actually think that I agree with
think
you.
you
I
could
agree
do
with
it
that.
inside.
That's
though.
like saying that police brutality will no longer exist because of technology. Like people will still kill each other.
And just to be
yeah,
optimistic
but like
on this,
also like now that cops are wearing video cams, like not that it's stopping, but at least we're proving it's happening. Whereas 10 years ago, you couldn't even prove that it happened. If you said that police brutality was a problem within people of color's communities, people were like, no, that doesn't happen. What are you talking about? Now we're like, look at this fucking video. This guy just shot him and he didn't have a gun.
But I mean,
I think that we're getting closer to
have
that.
I've
think
never heard of anyone saying that technology is going to eliminate physical violence.
But no,
But it is. It's already. That's the cyberbullying is
But it's-
eliminating physical violence.
It has not had an effect of
wait,
reducing
but,
wars.
but the problem with cyberbullying isn't that it's eliminated physical violence. It's just it becomes self-inflicted.
and
Like
look at the popularity of podcasting. All of a sudden, people are getting together and talking for much longer and more in depth. As long
Oh,
as
just
there's a
replace
microphone
and
in front
even
of
though
us.
Or
we're
replace radio.
talking
Yeah,
for
we have
much
to go.
longer, we need to talk for much shorter because Caleb's telling me get the fuck out of here. But before we all go, where can everyone follow you on social media? Where can they see you next? I'm going to start with you, Dave Cyrus.
You could see me at New York Comedy Club on next Sunday, the 14th, and I'll be around other places. Dave Cyrus, Cyrus.
Pete.
Pete Brocker. I am bouncing around all over New York. Usually you can find me if you check out Broadway Comedy Club. I'm there occasionally. And otherwise, just look around for Pete Brocker.
Gary.
Best place is Gary Levitt. Anywhere on social media, GaryLevitt.com. It's just Gary Levitt.
Follow the show on Twitter at The Blame Storm. Follow me on Twitter at Maryssa Smith. And you can catch me at Auto Shrunken Head on July the 7th at 6:30 p.m.
Me too.
And, yep, Dave will be there. And you can also catch me at Broadway Comedy Club on July the 13th at 10 p.m.
Me too, right?
And
Yeah,
Dave's
yeah.
going to say me too. I did not me too Dave, by the way.
No, I think you did book me
Dave
for that
just
show,
just me too'd himself.
You booked me.
I booked you. I didn't me too you.
She molested you while she booked you.
I
didn't think
I
he got the
don't do
job.
that. He's too old for the molestation. All right, you guys. Have a good night.